Welcome to Alpha Wolf Trading. Did you know that there's over 12,000 stocks or companies that trade on the OTC? Between the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange, you have over 7,000 companies. But us as retail investors, we wouldn't know that unless we were researching. Because why? Wall Street focuses on the elite, the big companies. And where the retail investor has their advantage is in small and micro-cap stocks. Why? Because you have the opportunity to speak directly with leadership. That is what this is all about here at Alpha Wolf Trading. We're trying to find the hidden gems, and we interview the executive teams of companies that we think meet the parameters to be those hidden gems. I also want to make sure you understand that this is not a paid-for promotion. I collect no compensation for the interviews I do here. These companies that I interview have been identified as potential opportunities for me and the members of Alpha Wolf Trading to receive a higher than average return on our investment. These companies I have identified either because of a technical setup on a chart, a fundamental change within the organization, new management team, new products, all kinds of different things that actually lead me here. But what do I think is the most important? Leadership. And that is why I do these interviews. I want to understand what drives the person that is leading the charge. I want to feel their passion. I want to understand their vision and the strategy that they're going to use to achieve success. That is what these interviews are for. I want to understand the share structure and the cap table, the size of the TAM, the total addressable market. This is the opportunity to learn all of those things. So sit back and enjoy. And if you learn anything from today's interview, do us a favor. Subscribe to the Alpha Wolf Trading YouTube channel. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. I am not a financial advisor. I recommend highly that before buying any security, speak to a financial advisor and do your own due diligence. Hey everybody, Tim from Alpha Wolf Trading coming at you with a very exciting story, one that I was not familiar with up until about 3 weeks ago. And now I'm very familiar with it. Even got to meet this gentleman in person. It's pretty amazing story. Victory Clean Energy Inc. is the name of the company, and the ticker symbol is VYEY. It is an OTC stock at the moment, but this is a Chris. I want to thank you for coming in and giving us a heads up on your story. Chris Headrick has been in the oil and gas industry for a long time.
Too long.
Been working on hydrogen for about, I don't know, Chris, why don't you tell us how long you've been working on that?
I actually started working on hydrogen back in 06. And I'm actually worse than a former oil and gas guy. I was a coal guy too. So I've got two strikes. I'm in redemption mode right now. We are, and I joke about that, but in all candor, there's never been any oil and gas company that I've ever worked with or been affiliated with, or a coal company that was doing anything intentionally to harm the environment. That would be insane. You wouldn't do that. But we have found a technology. Back in 06, I was trying to turn a coal field that I had bought, had a really low grade coal because of the high sulfur content. And I was trying to find somebody who could help me process that and turn it into synthetic diesel. And one of the requirements that we had to have access to hydrogen. There was 4 companies in the United States that you could buy hydrogen from in the quantities that we needed. And all 4 of them were monsters. And none of the pricing, everywhere each one you called the pricing was exactly the same. I mean, they had this stuff down cold. So we couldn't make the numbers work. Project didn't actually get off the ground, but I had started looking at hydrogen and the great debate is hydrogen an energy source or an energy carrier? And that's that's a constant argument that I have on LinkedIn all the time. The fact of the matter is, if you're putting it in a vehicle, and when I say vehicle, I'm not talking about just a car. I'm talking about a car, a truck, a train, a plane, a boat. All those things are being considered as hydrogen powered. That it's not a carrier. It's a damn fuel, and that has been mischaracterized by guys in my space for a long time, my old space, the old hydrocarbon space, and they continue to try to kind of mix the pieces together and keep it all really confusing. Short story is there's two different kinds of hydrogen. There's green hydrogen and there's not. So of the 100 million ton market that's out there today for industrial gas, 96% of that is gray hydrogen. There's a very small percentage of it that's green, and most of that's done by the other perplexing technology, which is electrolysis, which I just cannot. I've tried everything to wrap my head around that, but to spend 56 kilowatts of electricity to make 33 kilowatt hours of energy is just bad math, and there is no justification for it. You can't fix it.
Right.
So that's what I've been digging on, is trying to figure out there has to be a better solution. In 2009, I was the first outside investor in a technology that took biomass. At the time, it was switchgrass, which is just like a prairie grass. We were processing the switchgrass into a hydrogen-rich syngas. The hydrogen at that time was 65% by volume with switchgrass, and I did it. I put the scoop into the switchgrass, dropped it into the hopper, and watched the process from start to finish. Called an engineer, mining engineer friend of mine, who's working for us up in Kentucky, and I said, "Can you come down here and look at this technology, because it's doing something that I don't understand?" And I said, "Everything I'm reading tells me it can't do it." And I said, "Can you please come look at it and see what the heck he's doing?" He come down the next morning. This is Thursday in September of 2009. Friday morning, Jamie comes down, looks at the facility. He gets there at about 8:30, and calls me at about 10. And he said, "You got to sell the damn coal company." And I said, "Do what?" And he said, "We got to buy this." He said, "This is just absolutely amazing." And I said, "I'm not trying to buy anything." I said, "I'm just trying to get, find a source of hydrogen." I said, "I might invest some. I don't want to buy anything." And he said, "No," he said, "You don't understand." He said, "This is just unbelievable." So he came back over to the office. We sat down, ran through the mechanics, and he told me about the hydrogen market, which even today, the founder of that technology still only recognizes that there is the possibility of hydrogen as a replacement for fossil. He doesn't really think it's going to take hold. And the real short story here is we recognized even way back then that there was an opportunity for us to do something in our patch, oil and gas and coal, and replace. I was paying at the time $6 a gallon for diesel in Kentucky, delivered to our mines. Up in Alaska back in 12, 13, and 14, we were paying $9, $10, $11, as much as $12 a gallon to get diesel delivered to remote location operations. Anywhere that we could go where I could see biomass, because that's what we use to do this, there's an opportunity there for us to go set up a facility, produce the hydrogen. We use our own electricity. It's a standalone facility, and we can power oil and gas. We could power coal mines. We could, any remote mine anywhere in the world. That's what I focused on. And the idea was I could displace the fossil guys and actually let them use the fossil for something else. And that was the genesis of this thing. I've tracked it since we invested in 2009. I've been involved in it every day since. Went through all the different iterations. The technology is today being used to generate electricity and to make synthetic diesel, and it's been deployed around the world. But I'm the only one who saw value in hydrogen, and that's what we built. What was H2 Energy Group, which is still a wholly owned subsidiary of Victory Clean Energy. But we have now, we're going to move strictly to Victory Clean Energy from your interview forward. All of our hydrogen will be called Tue Green Hydrogen. We've trademarked that name and have been using that exclusively. So everything we're doing is Tue Green Hydrogen. Real simple concept. There's two kinds. There's Tue Green and there's everything else. And that's how we're delineating ourselves in the market. Besides another little kind of exclamation point, which is our price per kilogram.
Well, don't bring that one up yet. Just
Right?
hold on 1 second. So just to make sure everybody understands, isn't there blue? There's two: blue, green, blue, gray, and green. Right? Is that the way it works?
Yeah, I mean, you could generally break it down, but essentially blue is gray. They just
Yeah.
say they're doing carbon capture and sequestration. And the only thing I can tell you that would be more difficult than containing a molecule of hydrogen is trying to contain a molecule of CO2. In any oil and gas operation, anywhere in the world that I've ever been, it is a physical impossibility to capture and sequester all of the CO2 that you emit. It's just not going to happen. We're watching, and we do follow other technologies, right? I mean, we have a fiduciary responsibility to know what the heck's going on in our market.
So just to be clear, the
Yep.
input that you get, that you use to get in the process to get the hydrogen, right? That is what determines whether it's the blue, gray, or green.
Exactly. Exactly. So your gray hydrogen is just steam methane reformation from natural gas. Your blue hydrogen is the same input, natural gas, but you capture and sequester the CO2, and theoretically you're making it blue-ish, which means that it's clean-ish. It doesn't mean that it's carbon free or carbon neutral or carbon negative. It just means that you've reduced the amount of CO2. And then green hydrogen is supposedly carbon negative. So, depending on what the input is.
And that's because the input is not creating any
emissions.
Right. So then at the end result is your emission is vapor water.
Exactly.
Water vapor, I mean, right?
Exactly. That's it. 100%.
Okay.
That's
All
it.
right.
Yep.
Okay.
But now, as I say that, Tim, let me remind you of where all this stuff started. 20 years ago, we were talking about carbon reduction. I'm sure you recall that, right? Yeah. Now we've moved to everything has to be net zero or carbon negative. If you look at historically where we are as a country, out of all that mess that came from the Kyoto Protocol and all that, the United States was the only country that reduced its emission anywhere near what we proposed to do. And the way we did that was by moving from coal to natural gas. And natural gas is it's a lower emission than coal was. So there was some things that happened there that I don't think they were intentional. I think it was just the rest of the world. You can't deny in developing countries access to cheap electricity. That's what causes conflicts and problems that we're having all over the world. So that's been the problem. If they've got access to coal, which today is still the cheapest way to produce a kilowatt hour of electricity, hydro is another good opportunity. Solar and wind have their place. but they're not, they're not base load 24/7 electricity. They're absolutely intermittent, and there's nothing you can do to change that. And then there's other things, nuclear, and there's promise of fusion and things like that. We watch all that. But short
Which
story is,
when you and I first met, you're not sitting there thinking, hey, hydrogen is going to be the only thing that we're ever going to need.
no,
You told me straight up from the very get-go, we're going to need all of it. Right?
it's an all the above solution. You have to check that box because you can't make, we're working with a group. There's a country in Africa called Malawi. 96% of the people in Malawi, the residents, 96% don't have access to electricity. How is that even possible in the 21st century? How is that even acceptable? I don't understand that. So whatever we have to do, if we have to take it in damn wheelbarrows, we need to figure out how to get electricity to those people, because that's how you change and make people's lives better. You got to get them free, a cheap source of electricity to make this transition. We have to give everybody a baseline to start with, and then work our way up to the carbon negative or carbon free, in opportunities that everybody seems to be so focused on. I don't see how we get there. I told you it's not even mathematics; it's basic arithmetic. You can put all this stuff on a piece of paper and do the calculations and show where we have to get to. There's no politician alive today that honest to God believes we're going to be carbon free by 2050. If they do, there's something wrong with them. It's impossible. It can't be done. It's not in the realm of possibility. Doesn't matter what we do. If we stopped all CO2 emissions today, we still can't get there by 2050. That's just the mechanics of the system, and we don't control that system. And I think we're kind of starting to figure that out. So yeah, that's where this whole thing started for me. I wasn't trying to save the world. I was just trying to find a better way to repurpose fossil. We have to have plastics. It's become integral into everything we do. I mean, your phone, everything that you touch every day, there's plastic in it. And we need all the fossil that we have to ensure that stuff's there for the future. And that's just the edge of it, right? You think about all the chemicals that are made from fossil. We may not like them, but we need them. I mean, in order for us to continue to grow as humankind, we have to have access to all this, all the things that are derived from fossil. And everybody wants to shut it down. The only way it's going to happen is if we all move back into the caves. I mean, that's just a reality of the situation.
Yeah, I'm going to pass on the whole cave thing.
I have no interest in it.
I've got a man cave, but that's a whole different thing. You know what I mean?
That's a different animal. That's a different animal.
Back to a real cave. I'm going to pass on that. All right. So look, Chris. So now you said kilogram price per kilogram. We can venture to go there. Through your journey, you have had a lot of interesting pieces fall into place. I guess that's it.
We have. We really have. I told you early on in the call here, all of our facilities are standalone. We don't ever connect to the grid. Even if I've got access to cheaper electricity than I can produce it for, I can produce electricity for about 8.5 cents. I was on a phone call this morning with a company that we're working with up in Bellingham, Washington, and they can buy commercial electricity for about 9 cents. So technically, we could use that grid electricity, but if you look at grid electricity over the last 20 years, it's literally what we call a hockey stick, right? In the price. I've got family over in Germany. They're paying 54 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity. And that's based strictly on their government making some really horrific bets on energy, and our government's doing the same thing. And I'm not being mean. I'm just stating a fact. Government should not be in the technology picking business, because one thing I can tell you for certain is they don't have a clue of what they're even looking at. And you can look, if you want the roadmap for where you don't want to go, look at Germany, at what they've done. It's almost, if it weren't so damn serious, it's almost a comedy of errors. But what's happening is, in our lifetime, we're going to see some significant changes around the world. And a lot of them have been fostered by really bad choices on energy. And, you and I were talking about the grid and things like that in one of our other conversations. And we've not really, most people don't even think about what that is or how it impacts what we do every day. But Germany, when I was growing up, was one of the largest industrial economies in the world. And they are on the verge of energy poverty. And how that happened, you can actually just go back and read from Helmut Schmidt forward. You can read every bad decision that was made. Well, if you want to follow that all the way through, you go through the rest of the EU, look at UK, look at Ireland, Scotland, horrific energy choices. And they just keep making the same silly choices. We're doing the same thing here in the U.S. We've made some really bad decisions based on solar and wind. And short story is, best case scenario, 15% of the geography that's above water on the planet is set to where it would work for either wind or solar. That ain't enough. It just won't work. So we have to have baseload power, and that's what VYEY is all about. So we set up our hydrogen plants wherever we go. We generate our own electricity. We don't have to worry about the grid. We don't use water. All we need is access to biomass. And biomass for us, our first facility that we're doing, planned facilities in Red Bluff, California. I'll give you some more details on that in just a second. But we partnered with a company out there, a group out there, who's working with CAL FIRE, which, and this shocks me to say this out loud, the government actually set this organization up, and it makes sense. They're trying to prevent wildfires by going back and fixing 200 years of bad choices of no forestry management. The idea was you set these state parks, national parks up, and you never let humans go in and mess with anything. Well, our partner out there in Red Bluff is the Redding Rancheria tribe, and Jeremy Haywood's the president of the Redding Rancheria Economic Development Company. Jeremy will tell you in an instant that they've been doing forestry management as a people for 3,000 years. They don't need anybody to tell them how to manage the forest. And so through their stewardship agreements, they're going now and pulling the dead, diseased, and dying trees out of the forest and eliminating wildfires. And that's a government program that I'd never thought I would ever say you could have an impact that way, but it actually has. And I take my hat off to Governor Newsom. It's his program, and it's effective. It wouldn't be effective if we didn't have somebody like the Redding Rancheria tribe who understands the mechanics of what we're talking about. So we think there's enough there to do 20 years at Red Bluff, just in the northern part of the state of California. We think there's about 20 years of biomass on the floor that we can pull out, eliminate the chance for wildfires, and just make the forest a better place. And that is the most important relationship that we've established. I started the company in 2015. 2016, we incorporated and brought some of my team on. We met Jeremy and his group about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now. But we realized really early on that these guys, Jeremy told me about a program that they have called the Seven Generations. And I said, I said, what, you got to explain that to me. What is that? And he said, well, we're looking 7 generations ahead as to how we want, where we want the tribe to be. I said, 7 generations. I said, that's 210 years, Jeremy. And he said, oh, yeah, I know. And I'm like, I'd never heard anything like that. And they actually have a plan that reaches out 210 years. I need to be part of anybody that's thinking 210 years down the road. It's like Toyota, right? With their 1,000-year plan.
Yeah.
Uh, that's the kind of people that you need to think, but they're thinking sustainability. They're not necessarily just thinking renewability. And there's a huge difference between the two. Because you're renewable does not mean you're sustainable.
Right.
That's a misconception that has cost trillions of dollars of lost opportunity, and it's going to get worse. It's not getting any better. It's just the reality of the situation is sustainability and economics is part of that. And I harp on that all the time. If it's not economic, I don't know why the hell you'd even bother doing it. I don't understand that. Maybe I'm just an antique from literally back in the cave days, but I don't understand why you would even start down a road knowing that you're never going to make money. That doesn't make any sense to me. And you can't operate a business without income. You have to have it. So that's how we approached it. Jeremy and his team got it instantly, and he told us what his plans were, and we said, we'd love to partner with you. So we agreed on the first facility at Red Bluff, but Jeremy quickly came on board. We were doing an investor presentation in his office, and during the investor presentation, he looked over at me and smiled and said, "We're going to do 32 of these nationwide." And he had my map up on his screen, and that's when he told me that he wanted to do all 32 of these nationwide. So we've got a partner who understands the mission and where we're trying to get to, and has the mechanics in place to help us get there. And that's the most important relationship in my 35 years that I've been doing operating in the energy space. This is the most important relationship I've ever developed.
So the 32 locations, just so we're clear, the reason you came up with that number is because you had someone come in and show you how you could strategically have within a 200-mile radius of each of these 32 facilities, filling stations,
Yeah,
essentially.
we went to a truck operator, and he helped me lay this map out. He operated a national trucking company, and he helped me lay this map out and show me where the way the truckers looked at this thing. And if you've never been in logistics, there are absolutely, it's just like train tracks. These trucks have specific routes along the interstates that they run. And if you look at the existing infrastructure that's there now, essentially the truck stops, it's actually very well reasoned. I mean, they've had 20 years, 130 years to get all this stuff in place. So they do have a very well thought out infrastructure and highly competitive infrastructure for those. But when I started looking at this thing, I took my map and laid out what I thought made sense. And what I was working on was not even close to where we ended up at. As a matter of fact, I threw mine away. And what I was doing it on was just based on population centers. But population centers are one of the considerations. The other consideration is distance between refueling points, and the other transload facilities that are included in that, which includes ports, inland and on the coast, when the big container ships come in. Um, all that stuff has to be distributed, and it's distributed by truck and by rail, but primarily by truck. Last mile is always by truck. So these guys set up they call them a hub and spoke. So it's a terminal where the trucks go out and come back, right? And most of the big guys, 70 or 80% of their trucking is done on a day route where the trucker returns to the same terminal every night, and the balance of it's over the road long haul. They're trying to mitigate that and put as much of it on trains and ships as possible. And I've had some revelations in the last year with another company that we're working with, who has given me insights into the port to port transport business that I never conceptualized. Um, and Hank will probably kill me, but his name's Hank Hoffman, and Hank's got a company called WorkCat Holdings, and they've got a new ship design that is just absolutely revolutionary. And somehow I've coerced him into the idea of using hydrogen as his energy source, not energy carrier, his energy source on these ships. And we're going to with his ship and our hydrogen, and him and using his ships to transport from port to port, he can take our hydrogen to all these other ports. We don't have to put a production facility there. He takes it on these things called tank tankers, just a big bottle surrounded by steel, and he can take them and set them off at all the ports that they go to, and they can use that hydrogen in those ports to clean those ports up. It's a monumental step forward that I hadn't. It wasn't even on the radar, and we were introduced to this concept, and he told me about the Environmental Protection Agency's Clean Port initiatives, and it's just as potent as the Inflation Reduction Act as far as trying to have a direct impact on an industry. 2021, they put a mandate in that ships could not come into port anywhere in the United States using bunker fuel anymore. Well, they've also kind of changed that now. You can't come even using a Tier 4 diesel. You have to connect, when you get into port, you have to connect essentially to electricity. Well, we had that conversation out in Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago too. There ain't no electricity to connect to anymore. And these damn ships, these cruise ships, are just getting bigger and bigger. They're not getting smaller. And these things, some of them need, 5, 6, 7 megawatts while they're in port. That's not available. And Cape Canaveral, or, some of the huge ports where you've got dozens of these ships coming and going, that's not available. So we think that there's a huge market there that we're just starting to explore. But just from a logistics perspective, if you look at all 32 locations, they were well thought out in the idea that we can reach all the inland terminals, we can reach all the transload facilities. We're within striking distance of rail everywhere, and we're kind of semi following the big guys in the refueling business today. And there's only really 3 big companies, and everybody knows who they are. It's Pilot, Flying J, Travel Centers of America, and Love's Truck Stops.
So Chris, what is the ultimate goal? So you're going to do all these 32. I mean, what for what? I mean, you're going to do what? You're going to
right now the low hanging fruit's trucking. Just not just trucking, but transport in general. Between the ships and the trucks, it's a significant amount of emissions that we'll mitigate. There's also
are there any trucking companies right now that are? I mean, I know there was the one that rolled the truck downhill.
Yeah, that's a story for another day.
Right.
We can visit that when I told you that whole story.
So
But
I mean,
I'll be honest with you. The thing that we took away from that show out there in Vegas, Jeremy, the president of Redco, came out, and when he walked in, he had his iPhone up, and he was recording, at the expo, and he came over to the booth and sat down with me before we opened that morning, Monday morning. We were sitting at the booth, and Jeremy told me, he said, I did not understand what you meant when you said scope and scale of what we're talking about until I walked in this place today. And he said, this is absolutely amazing. and we had including the guys that rolled the truck down the hill. The company's Nikola Motors, and they have had their problems, but they've got some good people in place now who are, I hope, able to affect the transition away from that foolishness. They certainly seem like they have. There's another company that was there called Hyzon. Those are both OEMs. They're doing something a little different. They are still doing fuel cells, which I'm not convinced is actually the path forward. We had a couple of other little companies in the facility. One of them was Toyota. Toyota had a big Class 8 truck. Honda had a Class 8 truck. Of course, you've got Kenworth. Ball.
Isn't Hyundai also another one that's
Hyundai was right across from us on the main aisle of the show, and I mentioned our price earlier, and I guess it's perfect segue.
you haven't. You have not mentioned.
Okay, well,
off, and we haven't even given everybody the big.
well, we set our booth up, and we're actually kind of a study in, if you want to know, impact for dollars spent. These guys, Hyundai across from us, that had to be $1 million booth that they had set up. It was big enough where they had a full size Class 8 truck sitting in their booth. I mean, it was monstrous. And when we were setting up the day before the show opened, all their guys over there doing their practice speeches. You know, they get up on this, they got a lectern up there, and they've got all these chairs set up, and we set our little booth up, and ours was just a little fabric, 10 feet wide, 2 5-foot wings on it, on the main aisle of what was a monster show. And these people all had these hyper sophisticated booths and overhead, things, lighting, and it was absolutely amazing. We had this little tiny cloth booth with a table and chairs and 8 of us there. But on the very front corner of the booth, we had this little table set up, and on all 4 sides of the table said $4.75 a kilogram. And when the show opened, we actually had people falling. Somebody would stop and look at that, and the people behind them were talking, and they would run into them while they were, and then they looked down and see the 475, and then inevitably they came in the booth, and one of the guys who's with a big national utility came in and told me that he'd been working with one of our competitors for 4 years and had not gotten a fixed price from them in 4 years. And he said, I don't understand, how the hell can you produce hydrogen for 475? And my guys, there were 6 of us in the booth that day, and universally everybody said, we don't. We're selling it for 475. And he said, I don't understand. And I said, well, I can help you with that. And I said, you're working with the wrong company. And I said, this is our price, FOB, our facility, Red Bluff, Tampa, any of the other 32 locations, 475 FOB, our facility, or we co-locate and we go adjacent to your facility, and I can probably even save a little bit more off of that if I'm not having to put the refueling infrastructure. I can probably get down to 450, 460, and still make a really good profit for my shareholders. And that's the business model. We're the low cost guys in the space, and I call it economic gravity.
But you're the low cost guys in the space because of all of the different pieces that have come together over your long journey.
Yeah, actually, the big piece was 2009 when I found this technology, and it was a hydrogen-rich syngas. It wasn't pure hydrogen, so we had to spend a little time figuring that out. And I told you when we went to dinner that night that part of the equation was we hired a gentleman named Liberty Gura, Liberty's in South Africa. He's a chemical engineer, and he understands the process called pressure swing adsorption. So we take 65% pure hydrogen or 65% hydrogen rich syngas. We push it through this PSA. And in my world, in the oil and gas and coal business, bigger is always better, right? If you can build it bigger, your economies of scale get better. It's exactly the opposite, 180-degree opposite in this space. You put a bunch of small pressure swing absorbers together, your yields are higher. You get more kilograms on your output than you do against your input because it's a more efficient system. So we spend $1.5 million putting extra pressure swing absorption units in. We get that back in 13 months, and our yield goes up 8%. And it doesn't sound like a lot. You know, a lot of people wouldn't even look for 8%. But our business model is based purely on economics, and that 475 number is kind of the basis for where we're trying to get to. So you sign a contract with me today as, ABC Trucking. If I'm able to get my price down to 450 and you signed a contract with me at 475, I'm not keeping you at the 475. I'm going to bring you with me to 450 because we want all of our customers to be with us long term. We're once again, we're in a different world today than we were. But the guy that when I grew up, the guy that I understood and admired his business model was Mr. Rockefeller with Standard Oil. And the tactics that he used in that business were not always good, but if you were a shareholder in his company, they were really good for you. And everybody made a whole lot of money if they were playing with the Rockefellers. And his business model was based on economics. If I scale and I can drive the cost out and I can offer the cheapest price on a gallon of kerosene or whatever it might be, I'm going to control the market. Well, that's what I said. It's economic gravity. If you're the low cost guy, business will always come to wherever the low price is.
So let's highlight something here real quickly. So the hydrogen space, what has, and even with the solar and what is the one thing that a lot of companies have always counted on is the subsidies, right, from the government or whatever. And the first thing you said to me was, you can't build a business being reliant upon subsidies. As
nobody ever remembers that, Tim. Nobody ever remembers. I mean, that's the bottom line. We were working up in Alaska. Last oil and gas company I worked for, we were working up on the North Slope and in Cook Inlet and Anchorage. And the government in Alaska, the governor had given some pretty significant credits to go out and prove up new resources, new reserves in the oil and gas fields. And got a new governor in, and they just arbitrarily decided we're not paying these anymore. So the guys that had went in and spent all the money up on the North Slope, and it's a very harsh environment, very difficult place to work. If you didn't have those credits, you would not ever go up there. And all the big guys pulled out because it was such a damn difficult environment to work in. Well, the government just decides we're not going to pay these anymore. And you've got legacy assets.
Business model just got killed.
That's it. And I hate to say this one out loud, but when President Trump got elected, there were a lot of guys who were dependent on RINs, renewable identification numbers, LCFS credits, blender's tax credit, and that's universal. That wasn't just in synthetic diesel, renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuels, ethanol, you name it. All these guys were and still are hyper dependent on those subsidies. Well, President Trump started giving exclusions out to all the refineries where they didn't have to participate and buy those RINs to clean their emissions up. the market halved in 6 months, and got much worse. But what happened was anybody that was dependent on those subsidies, they're gone now. So we won't ever build a business. Now, I'm not saying I won't take them. I'm sure it's not going to take them before I let my competition take them.
But you're not going to be reliant upon them.
No, we're going to take them and use it to grow. That's what we're going to do.
You're going to be you are going to be able to be profitable regardless.
We're profitable day one. We go in production. We start making money. There's not
All right, Chris. Look, we could go on with this for a long time.
I can do it as long as you want to.
Where are we at right now today? First of all, how many shares do you have fully diluted outstanding?
We've got and that's an issue for us. We really need to have a much bigger conversation on where we are. We did a reverse merger into a company. If you look at our VYEY, you look at our link on our website, you'll see a name come up that is still problematic for most of our investors. It's a company called Victory Oilfield Tech Inc.
Right.
And we have, it was an oilfield company. It was a company I worked for as a consultant back in 2012, 2013. I knew all of the shareholders. I knew the principals. And I knew that it was a good, clean company, that they had spent the last 3 years kind of getting it situated to do a merger with something else. So that's how we ended up there. We've got our market cap today is $154 million. We've got about eight, and this sounds silly to say this out loud. We've got about 832,000 shares in the float. It's a very tightly held company. We're in the process of doing a registration statement. We're in the process of we're doing a preferred registration or a preferred offering right now that we're going to follow up with a registration statement. But the opportunity for us here is to get some more shares, get liquidity into the market, get more shareholders to the table. That's what we're focused on. You can't run a public company with 800,000 shares in the float. It's ridiculous.
That's the float. How many are outstanding? Well,
about 360 million shares total. We've got another 300 million authorized. We can do 2 billion shares is what we've actually authorized, but we've only got about 632 million out. That number is changing. As I said, we're going to do a registration statement. We're going to go out. I told you early on, we're building a demonstration facility in Tampa, Florida. It's just going to be a 3-ton a day where we can fly people in and see everything work in one place. So it's not right now the technology used, as I told you, to do synthetic diesel or renewable diesel and electricity. We don't have a facility anywhere where it's just the syngas to electricity to hydrogen. And that's what we're going to build in Florida. But that's the opportunity is once we get that facility up, and we think it's going to take us probably 6 to 9 months, depending entirely on compliance issues with regulatory agencies there. We want to do a pipeline, which in my opinion is the only way that we ever really get to a way to transport hydrogen efficiently. You can't do it in trailers long distance. It's got to be in pipelines. So we're kind of counting on that. But we'll have that facility up. I hope to have it up Q1 of next year for certain. And then, anybody can come in and see what we're doing, how we're doing it, and that it does exactly what it says, that it does exactly what we say it does. To that point, before we did the reverse merger, and for our earlier capital raises, we had a third-party engineering firm come in and actually go look at our tech and confirm that it actually did what we said it did. So
Chris,
we do have that.
So let me ask you a question. I mean, for me, that float is small. The float is tiny.
It's ridiculous.
The amount of shares outstanding, that's a big cap table, right? I mean,
Yep.
You get up to, for me, this is just me. You get to half a billion shares, a billion shares. That starts to get a little nerve-wracking for me, right? Because that is a big number. That's a big number of shares.
But you got to keep in mind, Tim, you do have to consider the market. I told you also at that, when we first chatted, nobody can conceptualize, and even the folks that are in the space, the analysts and all the guys that work in the oil and gas space, only those folks could really understand the scope and scale of the market we're talking about. This isn't a thing where you can have a small company come in and try to address this market. The market is absolutely beyond just the United States market in diesel. It's hard to comprehend the size of what we're talking about on a daily, not an annual basis, on a daily basis. The amount of diesel that is used every day nationwide is staggering. You're going to try to displace that. And at the same time, we're trying to displace natural gas. Those two items are, 100% essentially of how we move and operate every day. And you're not going to be able to replace that with a company with, 300 or 400 million shares of stock. We're going to have access to an enormous amount of capital. Each one of our facilities, the facility out in Red Bluff's about $62 million. We want to do 32 of those. But that's just the start. We also, as I said, we can also address the industrial hydrogen market, where I'm selling my hydrogen at $4.75 at our facility. If I co-locate next to an ammonia plant, I can sell it for less. I can sell it for essentially what they're paying for gray hydrogen today. So we've got nothing but opportunity, to deploy. What we have to have is a cap table that will allow us to do that. So you're not going to be able to do it with a traditional company where you're going to cap it at 200 or 300 million shares and hope it works. You have to be able to put the company stock to work and use our own capital to grow the business. Now, how we structure that, we've got a couple of guys in-house that are really good at that. Neil Goulden's our Chief Administrative Officer. David Wojtycki's a consulting financial advisor. Kevin De Leon's on our board. These guys have been doing this for 30 years and have a really good grasp on where we're trying to get to as a company. First step for us is to uplist, get out of the pinks, get onto OTCQB. We want to have that done by the end of the year. And then just as soon as we can, we want to uplist to NASDAQ. And that gives us access to the capital that we're going to have to really make this thing work. But I do understand, exactly what you're saying.
That's what I keep hearing, right? And this is where maybe for the average investor, this is what concerns. It's like, okay, so how many years of cash burn
we won't have no cash. Yeah, we're not going to have no cash burn. That ain't the business program.
Okay.
That's not how that's going to work. We'll start making money day one.
Capital, we're going to need access to capital, right?
Access to capital is a different story, but every one we build will make money.
Okay. That's really what it comes down to is, are you cash flow positive or, profit generating, right?
Each facility will generate a complete anomaly in our space. Each facility will generate cash flow positive income. Absolutely. Or we won't build it, period.
So I guess the way you got to look at it is, okay, so yeah, but you're still going to need funds to build the next new facility, right?
And we don't necessarily want to be diluted any further. I don't want my shareholders to take that burden on. So
right.
We'll do some kind of a preferred structure where we offer a good coupon rate. Unfortunately, with interest, where it is today, that rate is just tragically high that you would have to offer to make it make sense.
Right.
But it doesn't matter in the long term. Rates are not going to stay where they are. They can't. So we recognize, and this is not a race, right? This is a marathon. We're not doing a sprint. We're going to have to take this thing. 32 locations will take us. I want to do it in 5, but we think it's probably going to take 6 or 7 years to get all 32 locations out.
All right, Chris, let's not think that far out. This is our first introductory.
All right.
I always say to everyone that you can have a good product, you can have a good service. If you don't have great leadership, I think the odds are stacked against you.
No, I agree.
I didn't know who you were 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago.
Yep.
And you and I, our first conversation was 2.5 hours long.
Yep.
And then we went to dinner, and I met some of your team members, and look, I'm impressed. I'm impressed by your knowledge. You clearly know what the hell you're talking about. And we haven't even touched on everything that you and I have touched on.
Yeah, there's a lot more. There's a lot more there, and the opportunities just keep building.
So this is what I'm going to recommend. I'm going to recommend that you put VYEY on your radar. Go to their website, sign up for email investor alerts, and start paying attention to what's happening with this story, because
I appreciate that, Tim.
This is one that I think is, what would you say, Chris, is the next, for people that are just new to the story, what should they be looking for? What are the milestones that they should be seeing from the company that would make them feel as though your plan is on target, you're executing?
Follow us, follow our filings, because we'll give updates constantly on the permitting process out in California, which I told you is a challenge. The next big benchmark for us will be getting a registration statement filed, and that will be simultaneous to getting our demonstration plant online in Tampa. Once we get that facility up, it will be open to the anybody that wants to come in and visit will be welcome there, and it will be open. You'll never, we don't work in any black boxes or any of that craziness. You'll be able to see everything we're doing, from the biomass coming in to the biochar coming out, which we never even discussed, right? There's just so many different facets of this business that are just remarkable economic opportunities. But that's the big benchmark for us, is the demonstration facility. And that's not to prove the technology works. It's been being used for 15 years. There's nothing to prove there. It's just to get all the pieces in place. We'll generate our own electricity, we'll generate hydrogen, and we'll use biomass. You'll be able to see the whole process start to finish. That will be that checks the box. Once that's done, Katie barred the door. Everything else is behind us. In my mind, I was already there. When we started talking to the investment bankers, they put the brakes on us and said, well, you don't have all the pieces in one place. And I'm like, that's counterintuitive. All the pieces have been deployed for decades. It's just a matter of putting those together. And we had a third-party engineer come in and say that, but they were not seeing it.
They want to see it. Which is understandable. I mean, I get it.
Well, that's our bench. That's our high wall. That's our high wall.
That's what we should wait for before we have our next follow-up, right? I mean, I think
anytime, and I'll talk energy and hydrogen. I can do it for hours, and I like a good debate. I've had my share. We had some at dinner. So I'm always open, and anything that's new, I want to know about it. You've introduced me to a couple of amazing companies that I thought they were competitors, and turns out that there's opportunity. And the one thing I have learned is that there's always opportunity. I mean, even in adversity, there's opportunity.
I think one of the things I love about this story in particular is, I mean, look, we need things, you know, you and I have talked about poor choices that have been made by politicians, and even now today, going all electric to when there's a country that doesn't like us very much, that controls 90% of the materials that go into the batteries, that's concerning to me. We need alternate solutions, and this is a good one, right? I mean, this is a very compelling story for more reasons than just your low price hydrogen. It's just like you talked about, cleaning up those forests and reducing the impact of potential wildfires.
Remember, we had forest fires in Canada, which are just that's almost I can't conceptualize. I mean, I know Canada. I've been up there for years. I just couldn't imagine them having wildfire problems, but they've got them. Australia. I mean,
so
it's happening everywhere.
You look at the impact that this company potentially has, is not just low price hydrogen. I mean, there's a lot more to this story, and it to me is this is not a want, this is a need. We need this, right? So this is one that clearly this is going to be one of those 16-year overnight successes.
Yeah. We've laughed about that before, but it really is, and we have a good team of guys who are pulling the same way, and we are not shy about talking about what we do and how we're going to get there. I'm probably a little bit more outspoken than the rest of the team, but the fact of the matter is, economics matter in anything you do. And while I do agree that there is a bigger story, the real story for me and what I'm putting out into the public is we're the low cost guys in the space, and we're gonna maintain that. I'm gonna push.
And there are reasons. There are very specific reasons for why you will have a competitive advantage. It would be very difficult to match what you have. It'd just be very, very, very challenging to match what you have. So look,
that's our advantage, and I'm happy to be here. And anytime you got somebody that wants to debate it, I'm wide open.
All right, listen. Here's where I'm going to leave it. The next news release that you have that has that is meaningful, that maybe we'll have you back on and we'll talk about what's happening, and maybe we'll expand upon the biomass piece in our next segment. Sound good?
Great. Absolutely. I appreciate your time, Tim. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Chris, I love the story. I like you. I want to see you guys succeed. So
thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
All right, man. We'll catch you next time. Hold on a second.
Right. See you, brother.
Thank you for tuning in to another interview here at Alpha Wolf Trading. Today we had co-founder and chairman Chris Headrick from Victory Clean Energy, Inc. Ticker symbol VYEY. I hope you enjoyed today's interview, and if you did, do us a favor, give us a like. How about giving us a share? And make sure you smash that subscribe button. All of those things are very important to us here at Alpha Wolf Trading. We appreciate you taking time to do that. Until next time, stay safe. Alpha Wolf Trading wishes you the very best of success.